without even opening it. They think just because of our headline, without even hearing what we have to say, that we're what did I see? Somebody status warmonger?
Yeah, no, they're literally defending Putin's warmongering, though, an invasion. So listen, warmongering and imperialism is bad no matter who is doing it. And if you call it out on the Russian side, that doesn't mean you're defending NATO or the United States or anybody else. Also, I'm kind of surprised that folks don't know we have a very serious white supremacy problem in our armed forces. We absolutely do.
But by the way, you don't even know what our take is. So calm the fuck down. Holy shit. I'm demonetized with all the cursing. Tina, before we get to ongoing developments in this war, the good news is for people that enjoy both of us, you're getting 2 times us today. So we're here right now, and about 45 minutes, Tina and I will be on Status Coup's call-in channel, the call-in app, which is free for you to download. We did our first episode about a week or so ago with Brianna Joy Gray. It is basically a live call-in podcast app. So it's live podcasting where you
can call in and yell at me there if you'd like.
Yes. So we'll be there at 5:45. Colin, because I still don't remember, could you come on and tell people how they download Call-In? Because I forget.
Yeah. All you have to do to download Call-In is just open the App Store on either your Android or iPhone, whatever your preferred thing is. Download it, and then once you create your profile, just search Status Coup in the search bar or Jordan Chariton. Either one will pop up. And then you can just follow us, and you can see our weekly show, and you can actually individually subscribe to that so you get a notification. For example, when we're going to go live tonight, you'll get a notification when that pops up.
Absolutely. So we'll be doing that in 45 minutes. Hope you could join us. We had about 80 or so live listeners for our first one. Let's get it to 100 tonight. And it's a little looser because we could take calls. So, Tina, as I always like to preface, I'm not a foreign policy expert. By the way, I have been working on another investigative piece outside of the Russia-Ukraine war, so I've been a little preoccupied. And unfortunately, I found out today my dad has COVID. At the moment, he's feeling like crap, but not needing to be hospitalized or anything. So I got a lot going. I got a lot going on. Prayers for my father, even though he watches Fox News. I love him anyway. He's not feeling well, but so far it has not escalated past just feeling crummy. He's vaccinated and boosted and all that. So, Tina, let's start with what the headline is about that people are in a tizzy about. But why don't you listen to what I'm saying here? Yeah. Russia, this is the Reuters piece, Colin. Russia will, quote, stop in a moment if Ukraine meets its terms. So what are Russia's terms? The Kremlin says it insists on neutrality for Ukraine, meaning Ukraine will not be joining NATO. Ukraine will not be joining the European Union. In theory, I would say Ukraine is a sovereign country. So in principle, I wouldn't be for Russia dictating what Ukraine could do. But as an end to a war, I could make peace with Ukraine giving Russia what it wants, which is it changing their constitution to pledge we will not join NATO, we will not join the European Union. I don't want to say okay with that, but I could accept that for this to end. The other demand is for wants Ukraine to recognize the breakaway regions, the Donbas regions that Putin recognizes independent and separate from Ukraine as independent, and the loss of Crimea, which Russia obviously annexed many years ago. So those two, before we get to the third one, which I think we both are against, my thoughts on the first two are, in theory, I would want Ukraine to be able to decide if they want to join NATO or European Union. I'm not a fan of NATO, to be clear. NATO has violated its promises to Russia.
Absolutely has. Yes.
And recognizing Crimea and these separatist regions, if it means ending this war, I'm okay with that. What are your thoughts?
I agree with you. I'm not a fan of NATO either. I think NATO has been absolutely problematic in the build up to this. Regardless of what people think about, criticizing Russians' actions right now, and they should be criticized. This is an imperialist war, aggressive action that Putin is engaging in. that doesn't mean that there isn't a history there in which other folks have also made poor decisions or done bad things, including, Newland in the 2014 coup. I'm recognizing that. So both things can be bad. I do think recognizing the Russian separatist areas, I'm okay with that. I think a lot of the folks that live in those areas are obviously okay with that. It's complicated. That doesn't mean everybody that lives there does, but I think that would be acceptable. What's crazy to me right now, though, is the next item.
Yeah, let's get to that. And by the way, I forgot, smash that like button, share the live stream. Let's get it out to as many people as possible. So the next item is for Ukraine to demilitarize. Russia will finish demilitarization of the country. Colin, I don't want to steal your line because I think it's a good line. Could you come on and tell us how you phrased that before we went live? What is the equivalent of Russia demanding that Ukraine demilitarize?
You took it a little step further, but what I had said was it's the equivalent of like you're in a house and someone's, trying to bang down your door and saying they're going to kill you, and then you're like, okay, and they're like, all right, I'll stop. I just have like one of my conditions is just you have to remove every lock in your house. It's like,
right.
Why is that part of your condition?
It's totally unreasonable, in my opinion.
I take it a step further. That's like not knocking on their door, bursting through their door with a machete, fucking them up, the person, and then
yourself,
and then saying, "All right, I'll leave, and trust me, I won't come back. But you can't have any locks, security system, anything." So that's batshit crazy. To the people saying status warmonger, you cannot demand the country that is invading Ukraine. And Tina and I already said there is context. Russia does have a right to be very angry and threatened by NATO's eastward expansion, basically since the fall of the Soviet Union. That right does not give them credence to invade another country and kill God knows how many people at this point.
That's right.
Why
people understand he's bombing civilian areas. That's not hyperbole. That is absolutely the case. Now that I interviewed in Mariupol, we can no longer get a hold of her. They've been bombing Mariupol for 2 days now. Last we talked, she was collecting water in a rain barrel because they've had no utilities for many days now. She's running out of water. So, this is aggressive and wrong. It's immoral. Like, I just don't understand how that's debatable to anybody, especially if you say that you are an anti-imperialist or an anti-war person.
Well, I think you phrased it well, and this goes well beyond Russia and Ukraine to so many topics in politics. It's become a team sports game where you have to either be absolutist on one team or absolutist on the other. And if you're anywhere in between, or you say no, two things can be true at the same time, also called nuance, which is not really favored on platforms like YouTube, then you're screamed at. But the reality is, we are not CNN. We're not like, hey, pom poms for the Ukrainian president, and he's all this, and Russia has no right to feel threatened. This and that, they do. But you could have a right to feel threatened without committing a war that's murdering innocent civilians. By the way, there are Russian citizens that are also being punished now.
Absolutely. And we're going to talk about that. Yeah.
Right. So to me, all right, you want Ukraine to recognize Crimea as Russian and the separatist regions as independent? Fine. You want Ukraine to pledge they're not going to join NATO, change their constitution that they're not going to join NATO, that they're not going to join the European Union. Fine. But asking a country that you've just invaded and are killing its citizens, put down your weapons, trust us, we won't come back,
is insane.
I don't know, forget the morality of that. I don't know any country that would agree to that. Yeah. That would agree to demilitarize when in response to
invaded. Yeah.
Yeah. And also it wasn't in this article, but there was other reports that Putin and Russia were part of their offer was that the Ukrainian president could become like president pro temp, like a basically a symbolic position, but they would put in place their own prime minister, i.e. a puppet. So I also don't know how that happens, because then it's not Ukraine, it's just a puppet government for Russia. So, to me, I respect differences of opinions, but I just don't know from just a common sense point of view how people could say, yeah, Ukraine should just agree not to have a military, demilitarize in response to their invader who's killing its citizens, and trust us, we will put down our weapons and never come back. That's crazy. And that's a response, and it would endanger Ukrainian citizens further.
I agree. I think really what the culprit is for all of this too, that needs to be discussed more, is you have ultra nationalists on both sides of this war, right? Of the civil war that's been going on, that are driving this, right? Ultra nationalists are what brought us to the place that we are in today. And this is a global problem. It's not just with, Azov Battalion. Azov Battalion gets discussed a lot because media has access to them. I've mentioned this before. I have filmed guys here in California, Nazis here in California, that have Azov Battalion tattoos, that went there and trained with them back in, 2014 when the coup was. So nobody is saying this isn't a problem. It absolutely is a problem, but it isn't the only problem, and no group is monolithic in its beliefs. There are also neo-Nazis on the Russian side. That's not up for debate, but it doesn't get discussed.
Hey, by the way,
Black guys he's got a Hitler tattoo on his arm. He's been fighting in the Russian separatist side this entire time. That gets very little discussion.
I have a secret. I have a secret, Tina.
Uh-oh.
But it's only between you and us. We can't tell anyone else. The United States military has a Nazi problem.
Yeah, we absolutely do. That's the other thing. I find it remarkable that people don't understand that. I mean, the armed forces, just look into this. I've come across many white supremacists in the armed forces. San Diego, for example, there's some of the guys down there. Different discussion for a different day. But yeah, there are neo-Nazis everywhere, folks. Every country has neo-Nazis. The unfortunate reality is there is a wave of ultranationalism that has been sweeping the world for the last, 7 or 8 years and increasing. I think Trump absolutely did make that worse. It pulled sort of the Band-Aid off, or the mask off. So they feel very emboldened right now to discuss what they want to publicly and not be ashamed of it. So, it's not just the United States, it's everywhere. Fascism is on the rise. So I think it's really dangerous to not recognize that and to play team sports when there's fascist problems on both sides. Like either we realize what the common denominator is here and look at ways to mitigate that, or what are we doing?
Well, also, and let me just show this comment by Randy Stevens. Crimea already Russia, Donbass a war zone. Ukraine always claimed to be neutral, so why is the offer a joke? Like we said, we're both, I don't say okay, but both say fine to these things, to these concessions by Ukraine to end the war. But you cannot
ask them to demilitarize.
Do you understand what the offer is? Hey, we are invading and killing your people actively. For us to stop, you need to cease to have a military. You need to literally have no defense system for your country. That literally is suicide for any government, Ukraine or any government. So you could say Russia has legitimate concerns about another country right on its border, right on its doorstep, joining NATO or joining the European Union. I agree with that. You could say whatever, Crimea was annexed with Russia. Ukraine should just bite the bullet and accept that. The separatist regions, whatever, agree to that and just draw a line where the new boundaries are between Ukraine and these other regions. But you're saying, yeah, Ukraine, just tell your invader, we'll literally close up shop. We don't need a military. Who's to stop Putin from coming back in a year?
Exactly.
In 2, I mean, that's not ending the war. That's basically giving your country over to Russia, and with no guarantee that Russia is not going to come back when you have no military. When you have no military.
I agree. It's crazy. It's an unreasonable demand, and nobody's going to agree to that. So, and partially you have to sort of recognize that Putin realizes that on some level. Nobody is going to say, no, we're going to get rid of our military. No country. That's just not reasonable. It's just not.
Oh, but that's why it's an offer just to say, hey, we're trying to be reasonable. We'll end this any minute. but then you make a completely insane, unreasonable offer. Like we said, there's some things within the offer
that are reasonable, but not all
reasonable,
yeah.
But there's a poison pill inserted into it, which is, let's also move on to this, Tina. Ukraine, another offer by Russia was Ukraine on Monday. This is the NBC article, Colin. Ukraine on Monday dismissed Russia's promise to allow its citizens to travel safely on designated routes to Russia or its close ally, Belarus, with one Ukrainian official calling it propaganda and not driven by humanitarian concerns. Russia announced a ceasefire and said it was offering routes for safe passage out of the capital of Kyiv, the southern port city of Mariupol, and hard-hit areas of Kharkiv and Sumy in the northeast. But it set out clearly defined paths for anyone seeking to escape that Ukraine said were unacceptable in an effort to manipulate world leaders. What are your thoughts on that offer?
I think it's ridiculous. Also, I don't know why people are just like, okay, so we're supposed to not be stenographers for NATO, not be stenographers for the CIA. And I agree with that. We shouldn't be. Why should we turn around and be stenographers for the fucking Russian government? Because that's just as stupid. Pardon my French, but I'm reading some of these comments and I'm sorry, Putin does not want neutrality. He doesn't. That's ridiculous for him to claim that and telling Ukraine that they have to demilitarize. Again, like, everything in that offer isn't terrible, but that's just not going to happen.
Tina, first of all, and to the people expressing this, respect your views, but let's be real here. Putin came into this claiming the reason for this was to denazify Ukraine. Give me a fucking break. Yeah. If you looked at the map of the invasion, Russia was invading all around Ukraine, not just on its eastern border, which if it was just on its eastern border, then you could say, okay, he's doing this because of the threat of Ukraine joining NATO right on its eastern border. They encircled all the way on the west towards Poland. So if you know, I'm calling
that nonsense too, because, okay, listen, whether you guys like it or not, Zelensky is Jewish. So saying that the government is run by Nazis is just wrong. Are there neo-Nazis in Ukraine in some areas? Are they elected to office? Yes. Both of those things are true. It's complex. I would also add the other part of this equation that doesn't get discussed is there are absolutely neo-Nazis in the Russian separatist ranks as well. Why is that okay? I mean, are we really going to pick and choose what neo-Nazis are fine and which ones aren't? It just doesn't make sense to do that. Either, again, we call out all the ultra-nationalism that's driving this across the board, or we find ourselves in these really untenable positions.
Right. And by the way, just a point of reference here, if, for argument's sake, Ukraine did agree to demilitarize, which it basically makes the country Russia. It gives the country to Russia. What makes you think that Vladimir Putin would not go into Poland, would not go into other Eastern European countries that are part of NATO that should not have been Poland, Romania, the list goes on and on. What makes you think that he wouldn't do that? A lot of people thought, including me, that he wouldn't invade Ukraine. So it doesn't make a lot of sense. And I don't really understand like the whole notion where you say, oh, you sound like CNN. Do you hear CNN? Do you hear CNN criticizing NATO? I don't.
No, exactly.
Do you hear CNN saying, yeah, tell you the truth, Russia and Putin have valid concerns over NATO and over Ukraine joining the European Union? The difference is these aren't the ways to handle those concerns. Starting a war. So.
Yeah, you know, part of it too, I think that needs to be addressed is I really believe that the West is at fault. The United States in particular is at fault for using Zelensky, for using Ukraine as a pawn in their geopolitical games, right? They encouraged him to go to the mat against Putin and Russia, right? To use this might is right, really strong language, to stand his ground. And I think they all knew full well that at the end of the day, they weren't going to support him joining NATO over this or help send troops into the country to defend against this Russian invasion. They've pretty much hung him out to dry in a few ways, in my opinion. So there is also, I think, some culpability there.
Right. And by the way, just for reference, this was just sent to me. Reminder, when Ukraine became separate from Russia, they gave up its nuclear weapons. And Russia, the UK and US guaranteed its security. So Ukraine has already given up its nuclear weapons. It, like Tina and I said, I think they should accept Crimea as Russian, the separatist regions as independent. I think they should accept that, we're not going to join NATO, this and that, to end this war. But they've already given up their. So you want to get rid of your military, right? And they've already given up their nukes. Get rid of their military and just trust Vladimir Putin next to you. Insane. That's an insane mentality. And I don't really take people seriously calling that CNN talking points when I don't know any country. I don't know any country on earth that you would say, yeah, give up your military in response to the invaders. It's crazy. But Tina, what do you think specifically? Oh, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. I was going to say Lana has a good point here. She says some are outright denying any neo-Nazi presence in Ukraine. Does anyone have the difference of the numbers or percentages of neo-Nazis in Ukraine versus Russia versus U.S.? Maybe it's a fair comparison. I think it's roundly about 10%. And in fact, there was the Bandera readings that happened in Kiev end of February. And you'll hear these guys claim this, and I think this is factually sound, actually, that they're maybe 9%, 10% of the population, but they're controlling the narrative, and they've been able to push the country into war. They like that, obviously. But
by this standard, Tina, people are basically saying then we should go to war with the neo-Nazis in Orange County, California, that you've covered.
Right.
We should go to war with the neo-Nazis that I have literally seen at Trump rallies I covered.
And in fact, if you look at the federal indictments for Rise Above movement guys, Rundo, some of these guys, when they were arrested, these are legitimate neo-Nazis. Part of the indictment discusses them going to Ukraine and training there and using that as a training ground and bringing that stuff back with them. I mean, and it's not just the United States, Sweden, Nordic Front, like a lot of these groups are involved, but many of them are also on the Russian side. Like they're picking their poison if you go into their Telegram rooms. And interestingly enough, the White Lives Matter, which is kind of sort of the it group right now among these far right neo-Nazi groups, the admin on that particular Telegram is begging them to not do this. He's basically making the case that this is white brothers killing white brothers. We should all unify against, the Jew problem. This is the kind of language they use, right? And by reference to the Jew problem, they're referring to Zelensky because they're all anti-Semitic. So again, like, how is that shit okay?
But the point I guess I'm trying to make is America has a neo-Nazi problem.
Yes,
a lot of European countries. A lot of European countries have a neo-Nazi problem. A lot of I know for a fact America has a neo-Nazi problem in its military. That's not a talking point to go to war with America. That's not a talking point to go to war with Ukraine or Russia. It's a problem. It's a problem.
It's a problem that needs to be addressed. Yeah.
But that's not like that. People condoning what Russia is doing based on Ukraine is all neo-Nazi. Ukraine isn't all neo-Nazis. Kiev is like a city very similar to European, like Paris and Italy and Berlin. And, it's not much different. It's an urban area. It fairly, restaurants, bars, things like that. There's not like a whole section just for the neo-Nazis.
Right.
Since we don't have a full hour, I want to move on here.
Right. Okay. Because I can talk more about this. I mean, there's been synagogues that have been targeted by the Russian neo-Nazis in Donbass. I mean, people can look this information up if they want to.
But I want to move on because people, whatever, and keep those super chats coming. We'll read them at the end. People can say whatever they want, but Tina, I find it very interesting. Biden is. His poll numbers are way up, by the way, over all this. Colin, if we could show that. This is out of the State of the Union. Where did I put that? This is from NPR. Biden's poll numbers. Approval rating jumped to 47%, up 8 points from the NPR poll last month. Ukraine handling his handling of Ukraine up 18 points to 52%. His handling of COVID is now up to 55%, up 8 points. This is economic handling up 8 points to 45%. This is pretty standard. You want to say wag the dog, presidents. In this case, I think America did kind of low key was like, oh, didn't want Russia to invade Ukraine, but kind of like wink, wink, wouldn't have minded it because Biden, knew his poll numbers were in the toilet. So I do think there was the media in America and certain politicians were low-key were pushing this and beating the drums of the war. But the reason I bring up his poll numbers, I bet those people that now are supporting Biden more, I guess they don't have a problem with Biden advisors weighing Saudi Arabia trip for more oil.
Yeah.
Wow. Colin, let's put this up. Scoop. Biden advisors weigh Saudi Arabia trip for more oil. President Biden's advisors are discussing a possible visit to Saudi Arabia this spring to help repair relations and convince the kingdom to pump more oil. Axios has learned why it matters. A hat in hand trip would illustrate the gravity of the global energy crisis driven by Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Biden has chastised Saudi Arabia, and the CIA believes its de facto leader, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, was involved in the dismemberment of Washington Post columnist Jamal Khashoggi. And Biden officials are in Venezuela this weekend to meet with the government of President Nicolas Maduro. You gotta love, Tina, that when America needs oil, they recognize Maduro as the elected president. Remember, America was pushing this bullshit that, Juan Guaido is the new president of Venezuela. But now that America needs oil, we're going to go pay homage to President Nicolas Maduro. That's very interesting. But I want to zero in on
transparent. It's so transparent.
I want to zero in on this Saudi Arabia thing because, first of all, and I'm actually going to have Nick Estes, who's a really, really great guest tomorrow. He's an indigenous author, real big expert on fracking and desecration of native land for oil. But first of all, why are gas prices up? Because we were told, Tina, when I was at the Dakota Access Pipeline, freezing my ass off, when I've covered other pipelines, I was told this fracking and this drill baby drill was all necessary for American energy independence. So we did not rely on Russia or Venezuela or Saudi Arabia.
Yet here we are.
I just kept saying when I was there on the ground, this oil isn't being used in America. It's being exported to all these other countries. And look at that. Now, Biden, who's talking about the humanitarian crimes that Putin is doing in Russia, is now going to go kiss the ring. I don't know if it's Biden or his people, is now going to go kiss the ring of an actual, also a war criminal and a murderer, MBS, for oil. Isn't that interesting? So we're against the humanitarian war crime monster Putin, but because we've been lying.
Is like 10 times worse, in my opinion.
Right.
But that's been a constant thing with U.S. foreign policy, right? Saudi Arabia, always our allies, always our friends, no matter how gross their behavior is. It's remarkable. I mean, literally, the U.S. government loses all moral authority every time with this position. Well, as if they had it to begin with. Let's be honest.
Let's also be honest about something else. The reason the U.S. government and the media turned against Saudi Arabia was not because Saudi Arabia was committing genocide on the people of Yemen. The media here didn't care that we are literally refueling the Saudi warplanes that are dropping bombs on Yemeni school children, on Yemenis' weddings, starving the Yemenis. We don't care about that. The media started to care that we were an ally of Saudi Arabia when they killed a journalist. Hey, that's terrible. That's terrible what they did. It's terrible that they did that, not taking away from that. But that's what we cared about. Killing a journalist, not killing the Yemenis. And we're still helping Saudi Arabia in that genocide. So again, sorry folks, two things could be true at once. You could be against what Russia is doing, but also call out the United Corporations of America or the United States of Oil, as I like to say also. They've been lying to you. They have been destroying sacred Native American land for for centuries, but specifically for 20 years, digging through native reservations on the Great Plains in the Southwest, not just natives, but they've been putting a lot of these pipelines through areas with poor Black and brown people, poor areas. It has been fracked gas, crude oil. It was told to us, well, we need to do this because it will give us energy independence. So we're not reliant on geopolitical developments. We're not reliant on Saudi Arabia, on Russia, on Venezuela, on name your oil cartel when clearly we are, because the prices in California right now, you could tell me what, like $6 something?
Yeah, I saw 623 or something the other day, which I think is on the high end though.
Yeah, on the East Coast, it's well over $4 a gallon right now. So clearly they have been lying to you. This is not for energy independence. They literally allowed fossil fuckers and the big oil companies to desecrate native land and go and put ticking time bombs under rivers, including the Missouri River, where the Dakota Access Pipeline is, so that we could enrich oil companies. And now, not only have the Native Americans been paying for it, not only have the poor black and brown people that they're putting these pipelines through been paying for it, but all Americans are paying for it now at the gas pump.
Yep.
I don't want to hear about America's concern about war crimes or humanitarianism, this and that. Yeah. You can't have selective humanitarianism. You can't be against what Putin's doing, but then be like, hey, let me go kiss the ring of the murderous prince of Saudi Arabia. It's
rank hypocrisy.
It's outrageous.
It is.
Any last thoughts on Russia, Ukraine before we move on?
I did want to mention, they've been trying to, we kind of touched on the Mariupol situation. They've been trying to let civilians leave. You brought up that his routes both went into Russia and Belarus, which is also ludicrous. But also remember that in that interview I did with our gal there, one of the things she told me was that there were landmines around the city. I had thought that they had been placed there by the Russian separatists, but she clarified for me that actually both sides have placed landmines around Mariupol. So both the Russian separatists and the Ukrainian military. So it makes it very difficult for them to leave that port city. So the International Red Cross is reporting today when they were trying to evacuate some of the civilians that there were minefields in one of the routes that they were given. So, which checks with what she was telling us.
Right.
This is insane to me. I mean, how can anybody be okay with this? These are civilians that most of them don't have a vested interest in the ultranationalism on either side. And in fact, the gal that I talked to, just so folks understand this, is Russian. She's Russian Ukrainian, but she's Russian ethnicity. So it's a very complicated situation, and no group is monolithic in its beliefs. So I think we have to stop looking at a government and its people as being one and the same, because this is definitely not the case. How many of you have gone out into the streets to protest something the United States government has done? With regularity, I would imagine some of you. You think that the same isn't true for folks in Ukraine and Russia and other countries? Of course it is. Right. Many people have problems with what their governments do. Right. So I don't think it's fair to make blanket judgmental statements about any of these groups. I just don't.
And I think this is a good comment to wrap this topic on. Okay. I'm not trying to blow up your spot, John, but I just saw it. John says, why do I care if Russia captures Ukraine or Poland? Well, I think we need to have consistent, as progressives, as leftists, or just as good people, because I would hope we're all want to be good people. I think we need to have consistent concerns about the people of the world. So we shouldn't say, well, we're concerned about the brown people being slaughtered and starved in Yemen, in Somalia, the crippling effects that our sanctions have had on Venezuelan people, on Iranians. We're concerned about the people in Gaza, but we're not concerned about the slaughter of mostly white people in Ukraine. Yeah. I mean, to me, that's why you should care if Russia captures Ukraine, because it's not just capturing Ukraine. There's going to be a whole lot more people, innocent people, that die. They're not the people of Ukraine. Let me repeat: the people of Ukraine are not responsible for the U.S. and other NATO countries lying and not honoring its promises to Russia. The people of Ukraine are not responsible for that. And by the way, the people of Russia are not responsible for that either. And that's a good segue. I wasn't going to. I didn't think I had time to show this, but I think we should. We should also point out. I mean, Russian police are arresting pretty much all protesters. Colin,
they arrested 5,000 over the weekend. So
Colin, can we show that? Can we show that clip of? It looks like mostly older people, elderly people being arrested
Yeah.
by police.
Забираем всех. Забираем всех людей, я сказал еще раз. Вот этих всех стали, всех оставляем туда. Вот это вот. Спокойно.
Забираем, берем.
Совершение административного правонарушения вами. Могу объяснить? Пройдите, пожалуйста, сотрудники.
Как коршуны налетели.
Вы тоже, пожалуйста, пройдите.
Вот это забираем.
Ребят, ну вы-то что, неужели у вас это знаете? Мы знаем прекрасно, вы-то вот знаете. Сафонов? Или вы просто тупо выполняете?
So that's just some of the people they've arrested. And let me tell you what the first woman that they arrested was trying to say. This is the translation. I survived the Leningrad siege. My father died at the front. What do you want from me? Says an elderly woman in Kaliningrad today. We have friends and family in Ukraine, says another woman. You came to, and then the cop responds, you came to support the fascists, asked the cops, then orders them all arrested. So, I mean,
the cop might want to look at himself before he says anything about fascism. I think we should bear in mind too that the penalty, there's no First Amendment right in Russia the way there is there. So there are penalties for doing this, and it's up to 15 years in prison. So they had 5,000 people arrested. That's quite a large group of anti-war protesters in the country, I think.
right. So are people defending that too? Are we just across the board defending all things Russia? They can do whatever they want, kill as many people as they want, arrest their citizens that are protesting. I mean, come on, have some consistent standards. And to the person who said, stick to Flint, piss off. To me, if people don't agree, that's fine. But
this is somebody that's also saying this is propaganda. Like everything you disagree with isn't propaganda. Sometimes there are facts in the world and they might be displeasing to you. That's just how it is.
Correct. I want to quickly
add, both Jordan and I are very careful about what we present as being factual. We don't just fly off the handle and say this is factual. Believe me, that would be irresponsible, and a lot of people do that.
As a reminder to some of you, because you could call in and express your grievances if you want.
Yeah,
we're going to be moving over to call in a few minutes.
Call me. Yes.
Call in is the live podcasting app where people could call in. We did our first show about a week or so ago. So Tina and I are moving over to call in where we will continue this discussion and take calls. So go download the app. It's call in app. And when you download the app, type in, I think it's at Status Coup or my name, and follow us. And then you'll get an alert when we're live in a few minutes. I wanted to switch quickly, and we will read super chats, so keep them coming. I wanted to switch quickly because this topic is just so not breaking news, but equally disgusting. Colin, headline, conservative think tanks exclusive gathering.
Yeah.
Conservative think tanks exclusive gathering will include Biden official, but not Trump. A private, off-the-record gathering of conservative leaders and wealthy donors will convene this week in Sea Island, Georgia, with appearances by a Biden White House official and several critics of former President Trump. Trump was not invited to the exclusive event, which will be attended by some of the Republican Party's biggest donors, according to two people familiar with the event who were not authorized to discuss it. The Conservative American Enterprise Institute's annual World Forum this year will be held at the Cloister, a high-end hotel complex in Sea Island, and feature invite-only discussions, meals, and access to miles of private beach. Oh, boy. You can't say two-party duopoly louder than this. This reminds me of Hillary Clinton in 2016, openly courting donors of Jeb Bush and other Republicans, and trying this strategy to get never Trump Republicans. Okay. Kudos to the neocons for not inviting Trump, but Biden's people are going to go sit with basically, I don't know if the Koch brother is going to be there, but the equivalent of all these right-wing, Neanderthals, Biden's going to go there because civility, right? It's a joke.
You know what? I don't even think it's civility. So American Enterprise Institute, for folks that don't know who they are, this is a very, it's a neoconservative think tank that's been around 20, 25 years, maybe longer, actually. They were the architects of the Iraq war, the Iraq invasion, let's call it what it is, that was pushed by George Bush, Kagan and company, Negroponte. So this is a neoconservative think tank. There is a lot of crossover, and there always has been a lot of crossover with the Democratic Party and AEI. And in fact, not just with them, Neera Tandine, CAP, right? She has co-sponsored events with AEI. So they have not been ostracized by the Democrats in the past. I do think that they share similar disdain for any sort of isolationist foreign policy, which is part of what's driving this. I think Trump's remarks as far as being populist, isolationist, we can have a conversation whether he actually is that person, because I don't think he is. But having said that, they are, this is a group that has not met a war that they don't love. They do like to install this idea of a second Cold War. That's something that they've pushed over the years. And I think the Democratic Party has a lot of crossover beliefs with them. So it's not shocking to me that Biden or any other Democrat, for that matter, that is on the conservative side of the spectrum, would partner with them. And in fact, Neera Tandine, let's talk about her for a second, because I'm having a flashback. I got blocked by Neera on Twitter over this discussion because they had co-sponsored it was unbelievable, really. They had co-sponsored this weekend thing about discrimination with AEI. Part of AEI's legacy is a book called The Bell Curve with Charles Taylor. So this is not a group, let's put it this way, that really gives a shit about discrimination. The Bell Curve, if you don't know, is a book that basically discusses that IQ is linked to race, that groups are hardwired for intelligence. Some racial groups are hardwired for lesser intelligence. Ergo, we should not finance programs like Head Start, right? So does that sound like something a progressive think tank like CAP should be co-sponsoring a discrimination event with AEI? Like, it's crazy to me that this happened. But she engaged with me on Twitter, and then I ended up just really going after her, and she blocked me. But there's a legacy,
Let's just set the record. They're not progressive. It's the center for phony American progress. And B, I agree with some of the things you're saying about why Biden's people are going, crossover neocons. The reason Biden's people are going is because they want the Republican money. That's why they're going. Because they're corrupt, and they're building up their war chest for the midterms. They want, if Biden's going to run in 2024, or if it's going to be Vice President Harris or Mayor Pete or whatever, they're basically signaling to the Republicans, hey, we're here to play ball. We'll continue pretending that we want Build Back Better and we want these bold progressive policies, but then we'll just wink wink, and then we'll just throw out the playbook of excuses, the parliamentarian, the mailman, while shoveling through goodies for you Republican donors, like the privatized infrastructure deal. Right. So it's so transparent what's going on. Give me your money and I will give you a return times 10. And Biden doesn't have shame. The Democrats don't have shame about playing footsie with the Republicans and the Republican donors, because the Democrats are also Republicans, they're just a little verbally kinder than the Republicans. So that's basically what's going on. Let me read some super chats before we move over to call in. Lee, $5. Zelensky being Jewish is not an example of Nazis not being a problem in Ukraine. Please stop using it. I acknowledge you're saying that Nazis exist.
But nobody said that. But it is part of the equation. You cannot ignore the fact that he is Jewish. Now, can we also have a conversation about the fact that Azov Battalion is now a political movement there, and they're not the only one that has neo-Nazi membership, and that, yes, they have maybe 2 seats in the parliament. Yes, all of this is part of the equation, but you can't pick and choose which parts you listen to. It's a complex situation. That's all I'm saying. And I think a lot of people want to boil it down to an argument of good versus evil. And I don't think that is doing anybody any service at this point. It's just not that simple.
And Vadim Elegin, $10. What's ludicrous about corridors to Russia, Belarus Zelensky publicly says he'll arm those civilians in Lviv and send them back to fight. I didn't call that ludicrous, but I don't like if you're saying, hey, we'll give you safe refuge from Ukraine, come over to Russia, who's bombing you currently. I mean, you can't mandate that the only place these people could go is Russia or Belarus,
your ally, yeah,
who's in league with Russia.
Yeah.
So that doesn't really make sense. Russia is basically trying to have them come over to Russia or Belarus. But again, how do you know they're going to allow them to leave either? So it just, yeah.
It's crazy making. Also, you know, I feel like I need to address something. Somebody's saying George Soros is also Jewish. Yeah, okay, so he is. Listen, folks, again, going to say this. No group is monolithic in its beliefs. There are also neo-fascist Jewish folks, believe it or not. Like, do I personally find that to be bizarre? I do, because I don't think it jives with traditional Judaism at all, but that's a discussion for a different day. But point being is that there is a gamut of spectrum that exists in every single group, and we have to stop looking at a group and saying this is what this group believes, because it's just not. It's a disingenuous thing to do, and many times it can be racist. Really, if you're talking about certain other groups.
And also, the people talking about the neo-Nazi problem, whether you intend to or not, you're kind of subtly using that as a valid reason for Russia to invade Ukraine. Like Tina and I have talked about already, there is a neo-Nazi, white supremacist, authoritarian issue, and just straight up neo-Nazis, if we're focusing on that, around the world, including here in America. So that's not a reason to declare war on a country. It's a serious issue that should be addressed, not just in Ukraine, but all around the world. But that's not a reason to invade Ukraine. I'm sorry,
It's not. Jason, let me add this too, because I think it's important. It also comes across to me when folks say this stuff that they're picking and choosing which Nazis are acceptable to them.
Right.
I have a problem with that. Either you have a problem with neo-Nazism, either you do or you don't. It's that simple. But if you're going to tell me that there's fewer neo-Nazis in the Russian side, so that maybe that's okay, I'm going to have a problem with you. That is a lesser evil argument that I'm just not going to tolerate. I'm not. It's unacceptable.
Right.
We have to get to the place where we just say, no, neo-Nazism is wrong, period. Let's not entertain it at all in any spectrum, and look at all the other things that surround that.
All right. Time to call in, Tina. We're moving over to call in. I hope you'll join us there. Colin, can you tell people one more time how they join us at call in?
Yep. All you have to do is just download the Call-In app on the App Store, either on iPhone or Android. Once that's done, you just make a little profile, and then you can just go to the search bar and just search for Status Coup. You'll see us will be like the first result, and then you'll see our show as well as our last week's show as well that you can watch if you missed it, and you can go join this one, which will be starting in just a couple minutes, and then you can just join the room and raise your hand to call in and all that fun stuff.
Indeed.
So come join us, folks, if you want to.
And you could call in if you want to fight over the app. We could do that too. All right. We'll see you guys over at Call In a minute or two. Bye-bye.